Today I'm joined by Tony Keating. He's the CEO of ResApp. Tony's joining the Mortgage Network again. Welcome, Tony.
Thanks.
Good to see you back here. Just wondering if you could just give us a quick summary of ResApp before we get into some more detailed questions.
Sure. At ResApp, we're developing digital healthcare solutions for respiratory disease. We have software that sits on a smartphone that's able to diagnose respiratory disease and manage respiratory disease through listening to people's coughs. So we're a software company that looks for particular signatures in coughs and are able to match those signatures to diseases such as pneumonia, upper respiratory tract infections, croup, asthma.
Great. Share price has been on an absolute tear recently. What's creating all the interest in the stock?
So we have some really large milestones coming up over the next month. We have 2 clinical studies, one in Australia and one in the US, which have now completed enrolment. And we're expecting results from those studies very shortly in the next month.
So with the clinical trials, what are the key things that we're looking for?
So the main outputs from the clinical trials are positive % agreement and negative % agreement. So this is the number of patients who have the disease that we correctly predict have the disease, and the number of patients who don't have the disease we correctly predict that they don't have the disease. What we're looking for is a positive % agreement and a negative % agreement greater than 80%. These will allow us to now take that data through the regulatory process, open up Europe for us with respect to our Australian results, and open up the United States for us with respect to our US results.
Okay, so they're obviously key milestones we're looking for. Assuming that it all works out positively, what's the business model of the company going forward?
So we're really focused on telehealth, and we still see a very strong market opportunity there. In a telehealth session, this is where a doctor is visiting their client, their patient, over a video link. There's no access to a stethoscope, so the doctor can't use that first cut that's typically needed for respiratory disease. So we see a really strong value proposition in providing that doctor with an accurate remote diagnosis capability in a telehealth setting. So our business model there is a B2B business model, partnering with telehealth companies, integrating our test inside telehealth companies' existing software, and accessing the millions of people who are using telehealth day to day at the moment.
Okay. Now, you mentioned providing data to get through the regulatory arrangements. Have you got some other examples of companies that have already done that?
Yeah, so a few years ago, we'd be standing here saying we're one of the first companies bringing a digital diagnostic test through the FDA or through the TGA in Australia. But now the FDA have approved over 200 what are called mobile medical apps, including everything from diagnosing heart conditions through to diagnosing concussion, eye disorders. There's a whole numerous set of companies doing essentially what we're doing outside of respiratory.
Okay. We're talking about respiratory conditions, but I know you're also doing some work in sleep apnea. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're very pleased to announce roughly a month ago now that our sleep apnea program, which we've been running for around about a year, has borne its first fruit. We had some proof of concept results from around 700 patients, which meant that we could accurately diagnose sleep apnea by essentially putting a smartphone on a bedside table. So this is in comparison to a full sleep study, which, as many of you know, includes many different cables connected to your body, sleeping overnight in a very uncomfortable and unfamiliar environment. We're replacing all of that with simply a smartphone on the bedside table. And we're accurate. We're in the mid-80% accurate, which is more than enough for providing a screening tool for sleep apnea, which could go directly to consumers.
Okay, well, again, that sounds very exciting. So there's a couple of things we've got to focus in on as investors. The clinical results coming out at the end of August, the sleep apnea program.
Yep.
What else, from an investment point of view, is likely to happen over the next 6 to 12 months?
So we're now beginning to execute on our commercial strategy. So as we see these clinical data come in, as we see our regulatory submissions going forward, we're starting to execute on our strategy of partnering in the telehealth space and also working with hospital groups in the emergency departments and urgent care clinics to see that first commercial uptick of our technology. So we partnered recently with a German hospital network where we're designing a pilot study which is all about integrating our technology into their hospital environment. And that will really wedge open Europe for us. It'll provide us that first footprint into Europe and give us a great understanding of the European situation. So that to me is the next step for the company, is really you'll start to see us executing on that commercial strategy and delivering those first stages in commercial.
Okay, well, that sounds really interesting, Tony. We might leave the conversation there. I've been joined by Tony Keating, who's the CEO from ResApp.